When the internet began, bulletin board services, or BBS, became the first online communities of the so-called information superhighway. Using their phone lines, people logged in from all over America to talk about sports, games, movies, and on one BBS in particular, share their ghost stories. Over time, those communities all went dark, except for one lone server that continues to operate somewhere in an unknown part of Pennsylvania's Rust Belt. A relic of the 1990s, veiled in mystery, it is a digital archive of humanity's strangest encounters with the unknown, as told by the people who experienced them. My name is Brandon Schexnayder, and you are listening to Fear Daily.
Subject, stood up. User, D00P3D33. Posted, December 14th, 1991.
It was after 9 p.m. and Courtney still hadn't shown. The candle, which the host had cheerfully lit when it sat me at this table an hour ago, was now guttering down into a muddle of lumpy off-white wax. Only ordering a single glass of house red that entire time had done the same to my waitress's facial expression. I suspected if I waited much longer without buying food, a lot of it, they were either going to kick me out or have me disappeared by one of the thick-necked men in expensive suits who kept threading their way from the kitchen to a high doorway at the back of the dining room. She wasn't coming. Courtney, I mean. Sometimes you just know. Video dating is a fucking drag. The agency sends you videotapes, which you then pop into your VCR one by one, feeling your enthusiasm drain further from you every time you hit the eject button. Thing is, a lot of people believe in true love, and they assume that if it exists, the first person you're truly connected to, married, long-term, whatever, must be that person. But Ryan, you say, what happens if that love doesn't work out like 50% of most relationships? What happens is that no matter the equipment you got between your legs, you get to thinking that everything which comes afterward is some form of settling. You've already had your great love story, so why give your whole heart to one of the poor jamokes on those tapes? Doesn't second place deserve second best? It's a fucking stupid way to approach the world, but look around. It's 1991, baby. Fucking stupid is the name of the game. I raised a finger to the waitress, who acknowledged me with the same grim acceptance I've seen on more than a few of those dating profiles. She marched over, skirting through the small restaurant's warren of checker-top tables so nimbly I'd put money on her being able to do it blindfolded. The headlights of an approaching car played through the large stained glass window to my left, briefly turning the approaching girl's face into a red and green kaleidoscope. It wasn't a pleasant image. I closed my eyes until I'd heard the vehicle fully pass. The restaurant had been Courtney's choice, a medium nice Italian place out in Pittston. When we talked on the phone, I'd volunteered that there were perfectly good Italian places right in downtown Scranton, but she was adamant it had to be this one. It's owned by the mob, she said in her nasal Massachusetts accent. She had a thing for the mafia, she said, found it endlessly fascinating. Of course, by this, she meant watching movies like The Godfather and The Cotton Club, which have about as much to do with the real mafia as I do, but I knew that to push the point too hard would scotch the date before it ever happened. I'd agreed to meet her there for 8 p.m. Yes, sir. How can I help you? The waitress was short and curvy, with a face that looked like it could be puckish off the clock. On the clock, however, her patience was strained as I was taking up space that could be used by paying customers. I pointed at the plastic menu in front of me. Yeah, I don't think my date is coming, so I may as well eat. Can I get the asabuco? Maybe the bruschetta to start. What the hell? It's not like I'm watching my figure. The girl's face softened into a sad half smile that had me pining for the indifference of a moment ago. Of course you can. I'll put that in for you right away. Would you like another glass of wine? I said I would, and she nodded before heading off in the direction of the kitchen. I looked around. There was a good crowd full of old folks and families who looked like regulars and either didn't know or didn't care their all-you-can-eat pasta and meatballs were being subsidized by blood money. In fairness, it didn't weigh much on my conscience either. The waitress returned a few minutes later with my wine and a small blue bowl full of olives. Before I could protest that I hadn't ordered the latter, she said they were on the house, compliments of management, angling her head toward the swinging kitchen doors where stood a large Italian man. He nodded gruffly before disappearing into the back, a clatter of kitchen noise erupting as the door swung open. "Thank you," I told the waitress. "That's very kind. Please thank your manager for me too." That second glass of wine arriving reminded me that the first had worked its way through. "Excuse me," I said, catching the girl mid-exit. "Where's the bathroom?" She pointed toward the corridor where I'd seen the suited men coming and going all night. "Through that door and to the left, right at the end of the corridor. You can't miss it." Once she was gone, I stood up, my knees popping at the sudden movement. The wine must have hit me then, too, a light fuzz in my head that must have been waiting for me to move around. I'm not much of a drinker and had only really had that first glass to steady my nerves. I carefully picked my way through the throng of happy families, twice narrowly avoiding dragging my sleeve through the flame on a Chianti bottle turned candle holder. The corridor was as drab as the dining room had been overdone. Cinderblock walls, painted white long ago, now hocked by a million tiny scratches and dings. The floor had a simple black and white checkerboard pattern leading to a fire exit on my right and a weather-beaten wooden staircase to my left. She hadn't mentioned steps, but there was only one left, and this was it. I started to climb, groaning along with the steps beneath me. That muzzy feeling from the dining room got worse as I approached the second floor landing. Pushed though I may be, this was more than I'd ever experienced from a single glass of wine. The last thing I'd eaten had been almost 9 hours earlier, so I couldn't even blame my discomfort on food poisoning. It wasn't nausea exactly, more a feeling of disconnection, like I was simultaneously in my body experiencing everything and outside it watching. I'd never known anything like it before. I stopped just shy of the top step to collect myself, resting my elbows on my knees. My head was only a couple feet above the wooden step, and I couldn't help but notice it was also scratched like the walls, except these were fresh. 2 grouped sets of furrows. One of them had a splinter sticking upward, caked with... I narrowed my eyes. Was that blood? I squatted lower, careful to keep my balance on the wobbly staircase. Jesus, yes, it was blood, but that wasn't a splinter. It was a fingernail dug deep into the stained timber. Someone had been dragged up here. Inwardly, I cursed Courtney and her Taurus idea of organized crime. Fuck's sakes. Well, there was no way in hell I was going any further, driving need to piss or no. I straightened up and turned around, ready to march out of there right that moment when a strange noise drifted toward me from around the corner of the landing. It was as if someone were working a bellows, great intakes of wind followed by a rough, rubbery, crinkling noise. I could hear something else too. Men's voices, talking low and muffled crying. Every instinct I had told me to go. It's one thing to eat in a place like this when you're just another pig at the trough in complete ignorance. Witnessing things like whatever was happening here was the first step towards getting my very own episode of Hard Copy, but I couldn't get that crinkling out of my head or the breathy whoosh sound accompanying it. Shaking my head at my own stupidity, I mounted the landing. Whether because it didn't have the heat of 36 diners and a functioning kitchen or something else entirely, upstairs was much, much colder than down. It almost seemed to draw power from the bare light bulbs which lined the second hallway. I found myself looking down. Instead of a bright, steady glow, they cast an uneven, yellowish light that flickered at uneven intervals. It put an even more unreal spin on the entire situation. Worse, the cold had exacerbated my need to urinate, and I still didn't see a bathroom anywhere. The hallway was broken by 6 doors, 3 to a side, each spaced maybe 15 apart. The first 2 were closed, showing them to be carved with incredibly ornate patterns, totally at odds with the utilitarian hallways leading to them. Engraved into the heavy lumber, oak if I had to guess, were panels depicting scenes I could barely comprehend. In one, a young woman appeared to be standing in front of a fairy tale castle, surrounded on all sides by sand. Still, another showed horrifying monsters straight from some pulp novel, spiders made of bone, their skulls elongated and bulging, vomiting forth jeweled galaxies into an endless ocean. Before I could inspect further, the weeping from further down the hall grew in volume at the same time as the bellows increased their frequency. I could now make out individual voices, something speaking in English and sometimes in another language which wasn't Italian or any other I'd ever heard. You fucked up and thought we wouldn't know. How stupid are you? She's nothing but eyes. She sees thoughts you hide even from yourself. The speaker switched into their other language, provoking whoever had fucked up into sobbing even more desperately. The bellows now almost sounded human, a sonorous huff, 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 interspersed with an ever more moist crinkling. The middle door on the left was the source of the sounds. I pressed myself against the wall, edging nearer while trying to stay as far out of view as possible. The man was still speaking in that strange foreign tongue, his captive weeping uncontrollably through some kind of gag or restraint. The speech seemed to be building towards something, its rhythm familiar even if the words were not. As slowly as possible, I peeked my head toward the open doorway. Nothing could have prepared me for what waited on the other side. I was looking into a large room, a warehouse almost, stretched off into darkness. It was a fundamentally impossible thing. Massive industrial space atop a restaurant which itself wouldn't have taken up even a quarter of what I was seeing. Then, there were the people in it, or rather, the things. Tied to a steel chair was something I can best describe as a praying mantis, but all black and the size of a full-grown human. Its insectile features were ugly and alien, but at the same time, it was plainly consumed by fear, and it was hard not to feel pity. Standing opposite the bound creature were what looked like almost men. The ones who spoke was a kind of chimera, his unremarkable suit blending bizarrely into patches of exposed skin, some of it furry, some of it twisted into ugly scars. It was as if the clothes and animal skin were part of the same organism, a bizarre camouflage currently in flux. Far more horrifying was his companion, what I had thought of as the bellows. It was, in fact, some kind of nude man, his squat body covered in bright red scales. The crinkly noises were his belly, which was expanding and contracting in time with his deep huffing breaths, bulging out at least 2 or 3 feet. Without warning, he dropped into a squat, the huffing now a single low note. The mantis fought against its bonds, thrashing fruitlessly while the scaly fat man's jaw distended, unlatching itself and expanding to many times its original size. That low note grew in volume until it seemed to be pulling at the air itself. It filled my eardrums, a held bass note so loud it reverberated off of every surface. Tugging sensation appeared in my chest, becoming as noticeable, if not even more so, than the sound. It was as if it wanted to pull me toward the scaly man's now inhumanly gaping maw. No longer crying, the mantis was screaming into its gag. The suction was now undeniable. The red, squatting figure was pulling everything in that room and near it towards himself with a force that should have been impossible. I could feel the sensation in my chest, but the severity was a fraction of what was being experienced inside the room. At first, I couldn't fully comprehend what I was seeing. Then, it clicked into place like one of those magic eye puzzles. The mantis was secured too tightly to its chair, itself bolted to the ground to be moved by the vacuum. What was vulnerable was its hard obsidian skin, and I watched in frozen horror as armor-like chunks of it began to tear wetly away from its body, only to be ripped free and inhaled by the squatting man. Once its exterior was compromised, its inner workings swiftly followed, great ragged chunks of flesh followed by organs I couldn't hope to identify. Through it all, the bound figure writhed in what could only be supreme torment. The chimera looked bored, as if such sights were commonplace. It was his boredom which snapped me back to reality, forcing me to face the horror of what was happening. In a blind panic, I ran, and didn't stop until I'd made it down the stairs and out the fire exit door, straight into the arms of a burly Pittston cop carrying a brown paper takeout bag. Seeing the badge, triggered a base instinct in me, and I couldn't stop myself from babbling about what had just happened, how I'd seen men, or things that wanted us to think they were men, murder what looked like a space alien. I heard how ridiculous the words sounded, a suspicion confirmed by the pissed-off look on the cop's face. From the driver's seat, his partner rolled down the window and called out, "Hey, Frank, everything all right?" Frank, the takeout cop, shook his head dismissively. "Yeah, this fucking fruitcake says he saw some monsters kill an alien upstairs." Driver cop laughed out loud. "That's a new one. Come on, my food's getting cold." Officer Frank looked me right in the eyes. "Hal, whatever you've started smoking, stop." He went and turned towards his cruiser. "That's it? I just reported a murder to you, and that's all you're gonna do?" He sighed, passing the steaming brown bag through the car window to his partner. Frank put his hands on his hips. "Tell me again, where you saw this murder." I turned toward the restaurant, pointing wildly at the second floor, except there wasn't one. Upstairs," I said, lamely. "Yeah." Frank opened his doors. "I grew up here, buddy. This building is older than me, and it's never had a second floor. Now, how about you go back inside and make sure your tab is all paid up? Don't make us come back here, understand?" I didn't and never would, but I agreed all the same. Once they were gone, I stood there on the curb until the cruiser's taillights faded into the distance.
Subject: My sister's funeral. User: 1G24Del. Posted October 17th, 1996.
I was late to my sister's funeral. Not just behind schedule, late. The kind of late where they've already said the prayers, laid flowers, and were halfway through burying her. When I got to the cemetery, they were shoveling dirt onto a plain pine box. I ran down that hill so fast I nearly slid into the hole. My breath was coming in hard gasps, heart pounding in my ears. It was July, hot enough to burn your lungs just breathing. I could see my Aunt Opal turn when she heard me holler. She was in head-to-toe black, sweating through lace and polyester. She raised one hand like she was about to say something, but then just looked away. I hadn't seen May in 5 years. She raised me, pretty much. Mama died young and Daddy left not long after. May was 10 years older, already almost grown when I was still learning to tie my shoes. She worked nights at the hospital, took classes during the day, and still packed my lunch and combed the knots out of my hair every morning. She was my sister, but she was also everything else. Mother, best friend, protector. The kind of person you believe will always be there until the day they're not. They said it was a seizure. Sudden, at home, on the porch. I was in Birmingham when it happened, and I didn't even find out until a neighbor called me 2 days later. The funeral was already planned. May wouldn't want a fuss, they told me. That was bullshit. May loved a fuss. She just didn't like asking for it. I begged them to stop throwing dirt on top of that coffin, cried even, fell to my knees in the grass before it and said I needed to see her just one last time. Some of them looked embarrassed. others angry. Aunt Opal pursed her lips like she was smelling something sour. "Let her rest, Delia," she said flatly, like she was scolding a child. I screamed. I told them if they put that dirt on her without letting me see her, I'd never forgive a single one of them. My voice cracked like a whip across the yard. I didn't care how crazy I looked. I wanted to look crazy. If love didn't make you a little crazy, what was it worth anyway? Finally, the funeral director, some young man who looked like he still lived with his mama, nodded. It took 3 of them to lift the box back up. Every second they worked, I just kept thinking, please, just let me see her face. Then they undid the latches. The lid creaked when it opened. She looked like she was sleeping. Not waxy, not bruised or blue like I'd feared. Her hands were folded and her head was smoothed back under a lace veil. Her lips were parted just enough that I could see the tiniest gap between her teeth, the same one she used to smile through when she told me stories at bedtime. Then she opened her eyes. Slow at first, fluttering like she was waking from a long nap, and then, wide, alert, she blinked, her gaze flicking around unfocused. Her chest rose with a soft gasp, and then my sister looked at me. "You came," she whispered. The world went silent. I didn't faint, not like the stories say. I just stood there, holding my breath, afraid that if I moved, she'd slip away again. Then May sat up, shaky like a foal learning to stand, but she was alive. Alive. People were screaming. Someone ran to get help. The funeral boy dropped the shovel. Aunt Opal crossed herself and mumbled something about the Lord, but I didn't hear any of it. I was still staring at my sister. She was looking back at me like nothing had happened, like it was just another Sunday morning and we were getting ready for church. Then they rushed May to the hospital in Charleston, and the doctors said it was a rare condition. Something about her heart slowing to the point they thought she was gone. A mistake or a miracle. Nobody knew what to call it. May didn't say much after that. Stayed quiet. Spoke when spoken to. Nodded a lot. She slept with the lights on and didn't want to be left alone, but she wouldn't say why. I brought her back to my apartment in Birmingham to rest, and I thought maybe with time she'd tell me what it felt like, what she remembered. Weeks went by. She never cried, never asked questions, just sat on the porch for hours watching traffic. Sometimes she'd hum old songs from when we were little, like she was trying to remind herself who she was, until one day she was gone. I came home from work and the apartment was empty. Her things were still there. Clothes, shoes, toothbrush, but she was not. No note, no phone call, nothing. I called the police and they filed a report, said she was an adult and there were no signs of foul play, said maybe she needed space, but they didn't know her. May was not the kind of person to disappear without a word, not unless something was wrong. A week later, I got a postcard from Savannah. No return address, just a picture of the old lighthouse and 4 words in her handwriting. I had to go. I I have not heard from my sister since, and I still keep her room the way she left it just in case. I dust the dresser, change the sheets, I wait for the phone to ring, I wait for the mail. I wait. I don't know what happened that day in the cemetery. I don't know how someone can go from dead to living, from home to gone. All I know is that now I've lost my sister twice, and the second time hurts so much worse.
Fear Daily is an independent podcast hosted by Brandon Schexnayder and written by Brennan Storr, with Joanna Smith serving as the consulting editor, audio production by Rachel Boyd, and sound design by Southern Gothic Media. This podcast is a work of fiction. Names, characters, places, and incidents are either products of the author's imagination or are used fictitiously. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, or to real events or locations, is entirely coincidental. Ad-free versions of Fear Daily are available now on your favorite podcast apps. For more information, visit feardaily.com. But move fast, before the server goes offline.